239 days. Let that sink in for a second. 239 days Caitlin Clark sat on the sideline. No games, no highlight reels, no buzzer beaters, no logo threes dropping through the net while the arena loses its mind. Just silence. Waiting, rehabbing, watching. And in those 239 days, while she wasn't playing a single minute of basketball, Nike signed her for $28 million. Capital One put her in a national commercial sitting right next to Samuel L. Jackson, Magic Johnson, and Charles Barkley. Let me ask you something. When was the last time a brand dropped $28 million on an athlete who wasn't even on the court? That question right there, that's what this whole video is about. Because I don't think most people are asking the right question about Caitlin Clark. Everyone's talking about whether she's overhyped, whether she deserves the attention, whether she belongs at the top. And look, we're going to get into all of that today. Every uncomfortable corner of it. But the real question, the one that keeps me up at night, is this. Are brands paying for Caitlin Clark? Or are they paying for something much, much bigger than her? Stay with me until the end of this video because I'm going to show you 3 things. First, the number behind this commercial that nobody's actually broken down properly. Second, a behind-the-scenes moment with Magic Johnson that went nuclear online and why what he did in that moment says more than any quote ever could. And third, the real tension sitting underneath all of this. The thing that mainstream media keeps dancing around but never actually says out loud. Quick note before we get into it. Everything in this video is based on publicly available information, verified reports, and our own analysis of the footage. This channel is not affiliated with Caitlin Clark, the Indiana Fever, or the WNBA. We're not here to crown anyone or cancel anyone. We're here to look at what the data actually says and follow it wherever it goes. All opinions are for entertainment and informational purposes, and we respect every single player in this conversation. All right, let's go. So here's where this story starts. Not with a game, not with a stat line, with a diner. Capital One has been running their March Madness campaign for years. We're talking Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Spike Lee, Charles Barkley, a rotating cast of legends doing these hilarious rivalry skits every single March. Magic has his Magic Mart. Barkley has his Chuck Stop. Every year they collide. Every year the internet loves it. This year, 2026, Capital One added a new name to that world. WNBA name. For the first time in the history of that campaign. And it wasn't just any appearance. It wasn't a background cameo. It wasn't a quick handshake and a smile. They put Caitlin Clark in that diner booth with 3 of the most recognizable personalities in American entertainment and let her run. Now, before I get into what happened on that set, I need you to understand the scale of what we're actually looking at here. Because the numbers behind Caitlin Clark are not normal numbers. In her rookie season alone, one season, she moved 50,000 jerseys. 50,000. That broke every previous WNBA record. Her games were pulling 1.2 million live viewers at peak. The highest WNBA viewership numbers in history. Arenas across the league saw attendance jump by more than 25% on average when she came to town. And her rookie year drew the highest overall WNBA viewership the league had ever seen. Now here's what those numbers actually mean, and this is the part most people skip over. Those aren't basketball numbers. Those are market creation numbers. There's a difference between an athlete who performs well in an existing market and an athlete who builds an entirely new audience that didn't exist before. Think about it this way. Look at the comments on any Caitlin Clark video. You'll find them every single time people writing things like, "I had never watched a single WNBA game in my life until she showed up." Not one. And then suddenly they're watching every game. That's not a fan following a great player. That's a brand new consumer entering a market they never cared about before. And brands don't care about basketball. They care about that conversion. They care about the audience that wasn't there yesterday and is here today. So when Nike drops $28 million on Clark while she's sitting out with an injury, they're not paying for her jump shot. They're paying for that conversion power. They're betting on trajectory. Not where she is right now, where she's clearly going. And Capital One. Same logic. They didn't bring her into their biggest campaign of the year because she averaged 20 or so points in her rookie season. They brought her in because she represents a door to an audience of tens of millions of people who are now paying attention to women's basketball for the first time in their lives. That's what she walked into that diner representing. Now let's talk about what actually happened on that set, because this is where things get genuinely fascinating. Clark has talked about it openly. This was the first time she had ever met all three of them. Not one, not two, all three. Magic Johnson, Charles Barkley, Samuel L. Jackson, same day, same set. And here's the thing that got me. She said it without any kind of nervous energy. No, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm here vibe. She said something like, "These are people I watched on TV and admired, and now I'm getting to work with them." And then she just worked with them. Like she'd been doing it for years. The commercial itself, if you haven't seen it, the setup is perfect. The bit is about Capital One's 3% cash back on dining and entertainment. Magic Barkley and Samuel L. Jackson are sitting in a booth when Clark walks in. And the line is, "Somebody say 3." Because Caitlin lives for the threes. And she delivers it. From way down the counter, walks in like she owns the building, smooth, confident, completely unbothered. Then come the trick shots. Burger buns sailing through the air, landing perfectly on a plate. Magic's jaw drops. She flicks something onto Barkley's ice cream with pinpoint accuracy. The man protests, and she just hits him with that smirk. You know the smirk. The one that says, "Yeah, you saw that. We all saw that." The chemistry was real. The timing was ridiculous. And here's the detail that people kept missing when they watched this: she wasn't performing. She was just being herself. And herself happened to fit perfectly into that room. But the real moment, the one that broke the internet, came in the behind-the-scenes footage. Capital One posted it, and within hours, it had gone absolutely nuclear. Because there's a moment after one of the takes where Magic Johnson looks at Clark. He doesn't say anything for a second. He just looks at her, and then he shakes his head. Now, I want you to think about that shake of the head, because Magic Johnson has been around the greatest basketball players who ever lived. He played with Kareem, he played against Bird and Jordan, he coached and mentored and observed at the absolute highest level for decades. He has seen every kind of talent that this sport has to offer. And he shakes his head like, "I can't believe I'm watching this right now." He said it himself in the footage. She has a great personality. She's into it just as much as we're into it. And the way he said it, it wasn't marketing speak. It wasn't a polished quote for the press release. It was a man genuinely surprised by what he was seeing. Barkley was the same way. And look, if you know Charles Barkley, you know he does not hand out compliments easily. This is a man who built an entire career on saying exactly what he thinks, no matter who it offends. He famously said he was not a role model. He argues with everyone. He's been wrong on television about things and refuses to back down. And on that set, he kept repeating that she was incredible, that she was the real deal, that she belonged there. One of the crew members was caught on a hot mic whispering, "She's a superstar even when the cameras aren't rolling." And then added, "That's rare. Really rare." Here's what I think is actually happening in those moments. It's not just that Clark is charming or funny or good on camera, although she clearly is all of those things. It's that she shows up with the same energy she plays with. That precision you see when she's flicking something across the set, that's not a party trick. That's a person whose hands have been trained to be exact for 20-something years. The crew wasn't clapping after her trick shots because she got lucky. They were clapping because they could feel the difference between someone performing and someone just being exactly who they are. Magic didn't shake his head because Clark did something impressive. He shook his head because he recognized something. A spark. The same thing he's seen in people who end up changing entire sports. Now, I need to stop here and talk about something that I think deserves a real conversation. Because if I just spend this whole video hyping Caitlin Clark without acknowledging the tension underneath, I'm not doing my job. In the comment section of videos about this commercial, there's a reaction that keeps coming up. People writing things like, why is everyone losing their mind over Clark when Magic and Barkley and Samuel L. Jackson are right there? Stop overhyping a single person. Give those men their due. And I want to engage with that seriously, because it's a fair thing to notice. Magic Johnson is one of the greatest point guards in the history of professional basketball. Charles Barkley is one of the most compelling personalities the sport has ever produced. Samuel L. Jackson is one of the most iconic actors alive. These are not people who need Caitlin Clark to be relevant. They don't need her to validate them. Their legacies are absolutely cemented. So here's the distinction that I think matters. Magic Barkley and Samuel L. Jackson didn't get overshadowed in this commercial. They chose to share the spotlight. And those are two completely different things. When someone with that much power and that much history decides to bring a new voice into their space, that's not them getting pushed aside. That's them passing something. That's a deliberate act of recognition. Magic Johnson knows better than almost anyone alive what it looks like when someone is about to change a sport. He lived it. He was it. And there's something else worth saying. Because the critique that Clark is overhyped, that she's a media creation, or that the attention she receives is disproportionate, that critique sometimes gets tangled up in a conversation about race and about who the sports media decides to make into a star. And that's a real conversation. The history of American sports and how the spotlight gets distributed based on race, that is a real documented important thing. But here's what the numbers actually say. Clark didn't just attract attention because she's white. Clark attracted attention because she does things on a basketball court that most people have never seen at that level, and because she did it in college basketball in the most watched women's college games in history, and then brought that audience straight into the WNBA with her. The 50,000 jerseys, the 1.2 million viewers, those are the numbers that drive the business decisions. And the business decisions are what brought her to that diner. Ignoring that complexity doesn't serve anyone. Not the conversation about race in sports, not the conversation about Clark, not the WNBA. Which brings me to the part that nobody in mainstream media seems to want to say clearly. Charles Barkley has said it. Multiple times, in public, on television. He said y'all should be thanking that girl for getting you private charters. All the money and visibility she's bringing to the WNBA. Charter flights, bigger broadcasting deals, global attention. Those are real concrete things that the entire league now has that they did not have before Clark showed up. And here's the tension. When one person generates benefits that the whole group enjoys, but not everyone in that group is willing to acknowledge where those benefits came from, that creates friction. Real friction. The kind that doesn't go away just because people stop talking about it on camera. Magic Johnson drew a direct line from what he and Larry Bird did for the NBA in the 1980s when the league was struggling. Viewership was collapsing. The finals were being aired on tape delay to what Clark is doing right now. He said her journey mirrors theirs. That's not a compliment. That's a diagnosis. He's seen this movie before. He knows how it ends. And Clark, she just walks into a diner with three of the biggest personalities alive and acts like she's been there the whole time. That is the thing that I keep coming back to. 239 days on the sideline. Biggest Nike deal in WNBA history signed during that time. National campaign with NBA royalty. And none of it seems to shake her. I want to talk about what I actually think is going on there. Because I don't think it's arrogance. And I don't think it's just confidence in the conventional sense. I think Caitlin Clark has been in her own pressure cooker for so long that external noise, the hype, the criticism, the controversy, the cameras, the legends in the booth, it just doesn't land the same way for her anymore. When you have been the most scrutinized college basketball player of your generation, when you have played in front of more eyes than any woman in the history of college sports, when you have handled every variation of the media circus and come out still playing your game, you develop a kind of pressure immunity. She walked into that set not because she didn't feel the weight of the moment. I think she felt it completely. She walked in like that because she had already learned a long time ago that the weight doesn't have to change how you move. And brands see that. That's what $28 million actually buys. Not jump shots, not stats. That specific kind of unshakable center under pressure. Here's what I think this whole story is really about. Beyond the basketball, beyond the commercial, beyond the numbers. There's a kind of person who, when they're in a hole, when they're sitting out for 239 days, when the spotlight is moving on, when everyone's watching to see if they can come back, instead of shrinking, they just stay exactly who they are. They don't try to manage the narrative. They don't put out statements or craft a return storyline. They just keep being themselves with the same consistency that got them here in the first place. And the world, the serious players in the world, the Magics and the Barkleys who have seen everything, they recognize that. Because that quality is extraordinarily rare. You can develop skill, you can develop fitness, you can develop media savvy. But that particular kind of consistency under pressure, that thing where you show up the same way when the cameras are off as when they're on, most people spend entire careers trying to find that and never do. Clark walked into that diner with it already. That's not the end of the story, though. Because the real question, now the one I'm genuinely fascinated by, is what happens when she steps back onto that court. 239 days of buildup. $28 million of expectation, Magic Johnson's cosign, Capital One's biggest campaign, all of that weight coming with her into the first game back. The commercial is the setup, the return is the story. And I've already looked at what happened in those first games back, and I can tell you right now, it is not the narrative you've been reading in the sports columns. If Caitlin Clark has ever given you a moment that made you jump out of your seat, drop a basketball emoji in the comments right now. Let's see how many of us are actually here. And more importantly, tell me what you actually think. Do you believe Clark gets treated fairly? By the league? By the media? By her peers? I'm not asking for the safe answer. I want your real take. Drop it below. We read all of them, and we don't delete opinions just because they make people uncomfortable. Every single comment helps this story reach more sports fans who deserve the full picture, not just the version that fits the headline of the day. So if you think that matters, make some noise right now. And one more thing. You now know the full story behind this commercial. But there's something I haven't told you yet about what actually happened the first time Clark touched the ball in game action after those 239 days. I already made that video, and I'll tell you this much, it's not what anyone expected. It's right there on your screen. And here's the thing about that return. I've been in this sports content space long enough to know that what the analytics say about a player coming back from a long injury and what actually happens on the floor are almost never the same story. The body remembers things the brain can't fully predict. And with someone like Clark, whose entire game is built on reads and rhythm and split-second decisions made from 35 feet out, 239 days of rust hits differently than it does for a paint-bound big man. The skeptics had a real argument. They said the hype machine was going to meet reality the moment she stepped back on the floor, that the $28 million Nike deal was going to look reckless. That Capital One was going to quietly distance themselves from the narrative. That was the counter-argument being made in every corner of the internet where people had grown tired of hearing her name. But here's what's interesting about that argument. It assumed that Caitlin Clark's value was built entirely on what she could do right now today in this moment. And everything we've looked at in this video tells a completely different story. The brands didn't sign her for right now. The legends didn't shake their heads because of right now. The 50,000 jerseys didn't sell because of any single performance. They all bet on something that lives inside a person long before the results show up on a box score. And 239 days sitting still with all of that pressure building, with the whole world watching and waiting, doesn't erase what's inside. If anything, it reveals it. Because the people who fold under that kind of waiting, you never hear about them. They become the players who never reached their potential. Clark used those 239 days to sign the biggest endorsement deal in WNBA history and film a national commercial with 3 American icons. That's not resting, that's building. And Magic Johnson, who turned 239 days of patience into a career philosophy, who watched Bird make him better just by existing in the same league, who understands better than anyone that the greatest competitors don't need the stage to stay sharp. Magic shook his head in that diner because he was looking at someone who had clearly been building this whole time. So wherever you are right now, if you're in your own 239-day stretch, waiting for something to open up, sitting on the sideline while the world moves without you, remember what the brands saw. They didn't sign her after she came back. They signed her during. They looked at the trajectory, not the current moment, and they put their money down. The return is coming, and it's going to be worth every second of the wait.